Hello, hello. It's me again. So, today I'd like to talk about a very uncomfortable subject. White supremacy, racism, all the fun, edgy stuff. Um, so I'm just going to get right into it. I was planning on recording this about a week or so ago, but then a lot of things just went down last week. Awesome stuff. I just was a little overwhelmed by good things happening so close together that I'm like, I get overwhelmed by a collection of bad things and also lots of good things too. So I just couldn't really focus to record. So I am going to try to upload more often. And of course, this was the one I was planning on talking about last time. And I just was so overwhelmed with everything that I did not get to it. This is going to be uncomfortable because in this conversation, I plan on outing myself. I plan on talking about my own personal journey in regards to white supremacy and racism, the ideology that I was instilled with in the cult, and my personal journey to wherever the fuck it is I am now. I'm really not sure where I'm at in my journey, but anyways, let me just get started. So, I want to kind of do an overview of the cult's ideology towards specifically black people. Now, I will be talking in the future about sexism, homophobia, all the isms and phobias and all the things. They were awesome at all of that. And racism as well, elitism, all of that. So it was the environment I was born into. There is a story in the Bible, and if you're not familiar, Noah, who built the big ark, and even non religious people might have heard this story, he had three sons. Um, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Don't know if I'm pronouncing those all correctly. The way we believed, Japheth became the father to Europeans and white people. Shem became the father to all, like, just general POC, Middle Eastern, Asian, Latin, so on. And then Ham was the father to black people. This was what the cult believed. And there is a story in the Bible where after the flood, they all get very drunk, and Ham behaves inappropriately towards his father in a sexual manner, is my recollection. And Noah curses Ham and says that he will serve his brothers and his children's children, and so on and so forth. And he therefore curses the father of all black people. And so we had a perception that from this story that both being gay was inappropriate and curseable, and being black was a curse. Native people. That's a whole other story. There's so many people that are beneath the white man. In the cult, if you were a straight white man, and of course religious because it was a religious cult, you were better than everybody else. They did not allow gay people in the cult. I'm going off on other tangents. That's another story. Let me stay focused on black people. So they justified slavery, the enslavement of so many people, so many generations of people. They justified it as the white men doing God's work, because that's what we were supposed to do, because God ordained it through Noah, and that was just what we were supposed to do. God said so. So that was a way we grew up. However, supposedly, we were still supposed to have grace that some of these people could be saved. If they repented and joined our cult, then they were part of our elite utopia. It has come to my attention in more adult years by some other POC that I grew up with that they did not experience this utopia quite the same, which makes sense because, you can't be that friggin' racist and then the minute a black person joins, you're just like, you're equal to all of us. Like, Yeah. So big surprise that they experienced discrimination, racism, and all the wonderful things. Heavy, heavy sarcasm. I am a sarcastic bitch. Get used to it. Please recognize the sarcasm in my voice. So yeah, this was kind of the basis. Like, they literally justified slavery. Like, it was just our right as white people to enslave these people, which, big surprise. Like, slave owners used the Bible to justify slavery too. So I guess they weren't that off the mark from, 100 some years ago when this was like the common way to be. Now, my personal take on it was these people are savable, though. So, as a child, I don't remember ever really hating black people. I felt like they needed rescuing. So, I kind of approached it from the white savior perspective, where it was my place to help rescue these people from their condemned state that they were in. So, that was me as a child. I remember when I was really little, we were performing on Copacabana Beach, and me and my little sister got to talking to two Navy men. I don't know, seamen? Is that what you call? I don't know. They were in the U.S. Navy, and one was black and one was white. And I remember that they gave us gum, like a stick of gum. And I'd never seen a stick of gum before. I think I was 7 or 8, and my little sister would have been about 4 or 5. And um, they were very nice and very kind. And they were teasing, well, not teasing, but you know how sometimes you're like, oh, you're so cute. When you grow up, I'm going to marry you. And I was like, the black sailor wants to marry me. And if you're out there watching, I'm still waiting. I am grown. I am beyond grown. I'm old. No, I'm just kidding. Marriage, I don't think is for me. My person is gone, and I'm not I don't know that I'll ever find that, but that's again another story. Anyway, so I never like hated on them, but I did feel a strong need to rescue them and save them. So this is sort of where I started my journey in my view of black people. And I will admit that as a child in Brazil, which is a very multiracial, very mixed race place, with a lot of African ancestry, because Brazil, if you are unaware, had a lot of enslaved peoples. They had a lot. And it is the cop out. The US likes to say, well, we weren't the worst offenders. South America had more. Look at Brazil. And they're right. Brazil had a lot of enslaved people there. Their interaction with slaves were a little bit different to here. Not that they weren't horrible to them and all the rest, but they thought a happy slave was a better working slave. And so they did encourage them to keep their hairstyles, keep their music, keep their food, so that they would be more content. And if they did impregnate a woman with or without her consent, they would marry them and they would live in the home. So it was a slightly different approach. Still plenty of racism and colorism involved, but that would be why, or a big contributing factor to why Brazil is so multiracial and generations of mixed race, because they were mixing race way back when, whereas in the US, that was kept on the down low. Even though it was still happening, it was, here it was like, it's basically like they, we all know what it is up here. So, anyways, Brazil is much more affected by colorism because of this mixing. However, most of the wealthier people that we would encounter, because we did perform for senators and congress people, and we did mingle in the high society, highfalutin realms and circles and stuff, and the majority of them were light skinned or, of the paler persuasion. No one really is especially pale in Brazil. There are very pale people, but there's a lot of sun down there, and people really do enjoy their time in the sun. So even pale people like myself, I was actually not quite tan, but I had way, way, way more freckles that made me appear a little bit more tan. Just living in Brazil, which now I have a vampire appearance at this state. So anyways, that was sort of the environment I was growing up in Brazil. And I will say the majority of the poorest of the poor were brown and black people. And so in my child mind, I would see those people and I'm like, well, a lot of these people do kind of look cursed to me. They don't have good dental plans. They will have sores on their skin. When we'd go to orphanages, the majority of the children were darker skinned. The majority of the jails, the like just every, because we would perform at jails and orphanages and places such as that. And so it was hard not to think that maybe they had this one right, because the level of poverty in Brazil in certain areas is just beyond imagination. And yeah, for a child, I'm like, yeah, people with no teeth and no teeth and living in squalor with dirt floors in their homes, they kind of look a bit cursed to me. So that made sense. Actually, this was one of the first things that made me start to question things that I grew up believing in the cult. And it is the weirdest thing. Around 12 is when I started realizing that I was attracted to boys and men. Yes, that was about the age that I realized it. And lucky for me, I didn't have to come out about this. It was expected for me to be straight. And lucky for me, I was. You did not want to be gay in the cult. Again, another story. Anyways, I found that men were attractive to me and boys my age and so on. And we watched a couple of movies. And in these movies, there were two actors that stood out to me. One was Denzel Washington. And the other, he might not be as big as Denzel, but oh boy, did I crush hard. Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes. Have a quick side story to tell. When he posted about the Chauvin verdict coming in, I had left a comment, and right as I was commenting, some dweeb commented some bullshit. How Chauvin is essentially Jesus and the sacrificial lamb or some. It was stupid. And because I had just posted, like our comments went back to back, I was the first one to see his, and so I responded basically telling him he's in as nice a way that he is just completely off the mark and a really shit human being. And I fangirled so hard. I took a screenshot of it. Wesley Snipes liked my comment. And I was like, oh, I showed it to my sisters. I think I told half my clients. I'm like, oh my God, he knows I exist. And one of my sisters was like, you should message him. I'm like, he doesn't know I exist like that. I don't fangirl over many people, but forever it will be an honor that Wesley Snipes liked this little comment I made. Anyways, I digress. When I saw these two men in movies, for one, both of them were the leading actors in their movies, which I'm like, that's different. They're usually a supporting actor, not the lead actor. This is amazing. And I noticed something else. They had quite a lovely appearance. The sort of appearance that when you look at them, you don't think they might be cursed. First, they're talented. If they're actors, they're probably making some bang bucks. So they have wealth, they have talent, they have lovely features. Nothing about them appeared to be cursed. So I started wondering, I'm like, well, now I'm confused. This doesn't make sense. They're not cursed, but they're not part of the cult. They're not part of our elite, saved, rescued force of end-time warriors. How exactly did this happen? So that got my little wheels in my brain turning. And yeah, so that was one of the first little inklings that maybe something was off in my environment and the things that I had been taught. And if these two men weren't cursed, maybe there were other black people that were also not cursed. So maybe this theology I grew up believing might not be entirely accurate. And if it's even a bit inaccurate, it's possible that they are inaccurate in other ways. And that kind of opened up a whole new realm of thinking. So when I was 18, I left the cult. There are many other things, and I'll probably do a story time on specifically like the whole process of me going through leaving the cult. But I'm trying to stay on point specifically on my personal journey from white supremacy and racism into wherever it is that I am now. So I left the cult when I was 18, early 98. I did not have, I had $50 and a 2 month old. To me, I was in a foreign country. I had spent a year here prior, but I was in a foreign country. To me, it was weird that people spoke English everywhere. Every time I heard my name, I thought people were talking to me. It was an overwhelming experience. And so for the first several years, I was just struggling to just feed my child and not kill him, and trying to process my trauma and trying to establish some semblance of a stable life for my child. So I was really oblivious and, dare I say, ignorant to a lot of things. I still to this day have so many pop culture references that I have no idea what people are talking about. There are many classic TV shows and musical artists. I mean, I discovered Aerosmith in the movie Armageddon. I'm like, wow, these old people can sing. This is amazing. To break into the business at this age, and people are like, where the hell have you been? They've been in the business since you were born. I'm like, oh, I didn't know. So there's a lot of things that I still to this day am catching up on in pop culture. People will be like, you should know this. This was in the 80s. And I'm like, in the 80s, I was under my rock in the cult in Brazil, and I don't know. So there was a lot of things I was behind on. And there was one incident that I am going to share. I think it was the first year I was doing hair. So that would have been 2003. Oh, it's coming up 18 years. So it would have been 2003. It's possible it was 2004. So I would have been either 23 or 24 years old at the time. I dressed up for Halloween and I did blackface. I'm really worried that that one quote is going to be clipped and not the entire story. This isn't a justification, but I will explain my reasoning behind it. I was a fictional character, or mythological character is a better description. I was Isis, the Egyptian queen of the gods. A lot of people mistook me for Cleopatra, and my response was, why be a queen when you can be queen of the gods? So I thought that if I was going to depict an African goddess, I should do something to appear African. An Egyptian goddess would not be pale and freckled with see-through fucking skin like me. They would be black. And so I thought I was being respectful to the mythology by doing my entire skin in dark foundation. I got like the darkest foundation I could find, and I did everything. I did every exposed bit of my skin, my neck, inside my ears. I tried as best to get like as into my eyes as I could without like blinding myself. People did not recognize me. The only part that was not in this makeup would have been any part that was covered by clothing, and throughout the day as I shampooed clients, my hands became white. But beyond that, I was every inch of me. Oh shoot, I have a picture somewhere. Shoot, I forget where I put the picture. I should have found this beforehand. Anyways, I have the picture. A couple. I made my entire outfit. I sewed a bunch of teeny tiny beads and made like the big necklace. And it's a little busted at this point because it's been almost 18 years. It's been 18 years. And the metal's kind of rusted a bit. But It had a big ankh on the center of it that I did in a like woven pattern in with the beads, and um, I made I made the outfit. I got a wig, like the long straight wig, and I made a headpiece for it, and it was a whole deal. And yeah, I thought I was being respectful by doing this. I did not know the history of blackface in America, of making fun of the minstrel era. I am aware now. I would not do that again. But that is something that I did. And if people want to come in the comments and say that I was ignorant and whatever else, you would be correct. I was ignorant. I was unaware, and I did not know how what I chose to dress up as for Halloween would be offensive or would be harmful or would be. I didn't know any of that. I really didn't. So that is something that I did in my earlier years. Over the years, I've always been curious to try to understand perspectives outside of my own. I understand that my cult upbringing gave me a rather slanted, twisted, backwards sort of perspective on the world. And when I realized that that was the case, I have become more open to other people's perceptions of things. I don't always agree, and I am pretty stubborn on a lot of things. Friends of mine will affirm this. However, I do like to open my mind to a new perspective because I'm well aware that my perspective could be tainted from my past perception of things. And while I'd like to think that I'm very enlightened and I have, come to this place that I'm at now, I'm still very aware that I could still be tainted by that past and that view of the world. And so I do tend to be pretty open, even if the criticism is a little hard to digest. My initial reaction when someone calls me names or whatever is kind of like, oh, I don't like you. But then I'm like, okay, ouch, but what are you saying and what can I take away from this? And it has been through interacting, making friends with other Black people, having clients who are Black, interacting with Black people online that took the time to be patient. There was something, oh, I forget what it was about. I forget what it was, but there was a woman trying to explain, it may have been BLM, I'm not sure exactly, but it was something in relation to Black struggles that she was trying very patiently to explain to someone who was very unwilling to listen. I came across this interaction, I think like a whole 2 years or so after that interaction had occurred. And I read what the very patient woman was saying, and something clicked in my brain. And I was like, oh, I get it now. She explained it in such a good way. And at this point, I'm forgetting in this moment what it was. I do think maybe it was to do with taking a knee. I really, my brain is malfunctioning at the moment. I will remember as soon as I turn off. Yeah, that's how it happens for me. But I was so appreciative that this woman had been so patient with someone so unwilling to listen. And it clicked for me that I left her a comment and just told her how much I appreciated the time she took to explain that. And I understood now because she took the time. Jordan and I had many lengthy conversations, and I continue to have conversations with my friends on all sorts of manners. And they do call me out if I say or do something that is inappropriate. They will let me know. I will fight them if I am not willing. Every so often, I'm like, I'm here. I have grown to this point. And at this moment, I'm not willing to accept this. Like, that's one step too far for me. I am a little old and I do take a little time to acclimate to new information and new knowledge. So I'm not perfect. I don't always progress as rapidly as I could, should, or whatever. I don't. But I am always willing to listen. And if it makes sense to me, which very often it does, I will try to incorporate that into my life and into my perspective of the world and go on from there. And so, yeah, I guess that's as close to a nutshell. I'm trying to think if there was any more out myself of terrible things that I've done. I'm sure I have. But Yeah, I'm sure there's moments that I've done things or said things that are still not great. I am not perfect, and I still recognize that I still have a journey in front of me. Um, and yeah, I guess the reason I really felt this was pertinent to share is it gives me a lot of hope that if someone raised in the environment I was can turn out to love and care about Black people, who can march with BLM, who can be moved to tears at hearing the guilty verdict for uh, the murderer of George Floyd. Let's just say that because I don't want to say his name. Rather say George Floyd's name. I I'd like to believe that there is hope for other people. And if you might be a little newer in your journey of understanding and you are actually willing to open your mind to a different perspective that you didn't consider from, it's hard to understand a life that you haven't lived. A lot of people don't understand the life that I lived in the cult, and it's hard for me as a white person to understand. I can empathize, but I'll never fully understand what it's like to live as a Black person in America, in Brazil, or in any other place in the world. I won't ever understand it because it's not a life that I live. By having a lot of Black friends and by having been engaged to a Black man, I have seen closer to home and closer to people that I care about. I have seen negative effects in the way things affect them, and it bothers me because it bothers them. But I don't just have empathy because I have friends that are Black. I care about other people as well. And I want other people to care about me and my bizarre crazy that was my life, is my life. And so I need to in turn do the same. So even if someone lives a life that's very different from yours and you just can't relate, that you're like, that sounds so insane that that can't be real, maybe open up your mind that maybe those things can actually be real. You just don't have anything to compare it to because it's just so foreign compared to the life you lead. And that's okay. We can all learn and grow. And, the more of us who do put some effort into trying to understand a perspective that's different from our own and a life experience that's very foreign to you, the more we try to open up our minds and try to understand and try to empathize with someone who's just different, you might come to find that they're not that different. And they have a lot of the same struggles. And yeah, they have extra struggles that are specific to them and that are also specific to being Black or light skinned, dark skinned, everybody. And God, I hope I'm not using horrible terms. I try to be mindful, but I'm not always very PC. But yeah, maybe knowing that someone can go from literally thinking that white people were justified in the horrible torture and enslavement and murder and rape that was inflicted on Black people in our history and in other histories, and the problems that still carry on to this day, which is a whole other video. Maybe if I can get to the place I'm at now, maybe there's hope for other people, and maybe you're one of those people that don't really understand. And if you are, hit me up. Might be able to help point you in a direction. And I will say, having actual friends who come from those backgrounds, who live that experience, is a wonderful way to have empathy for another person. Although they do not need to give their emotional energy to educate you. It is a kindness when they choose to, and it should be appreciated, not required. Google is your friend, and you can learn all sorts of history that is not in the history books, because our history here in the States has been whitewashed. Lucky for me, I already knew I was poorly educated, so I went looking for more education, and this is where and the internet is a wonderful place, full of lots of misinformation, but also a lot of really good, valid information. So, yeah, I guess I guess that's what I wanted to say. I will end this now, and yeah, I will buckle up for anyone telling me that I said things wrong, or that maybe I'm a racist for doing blackface in my 20s. Maybe. Um, yeah. I'll add this one other thing. I did refuse to do blackface as an adult. Jordan thought it would be hilarious if we dressed up as each other. He would use white foundation on his skin, and I could use black foundation on my skin. And I told him he's a fucking asshole for recommending that. I'm like, you would look like a clown, and I would look like a fucking racist and probably get my ass beat. So you're funny, but hell no. And he's like, oh, it would be especially funny if I wasn't available when kids came to the house and just you answered the door. I'm like, that would not be funny. Are you trying to get my ass killed? I'm like, I am not doing that. And he's like, be sure you just do the face. I'm like, yeah, you are not funny now. Yeah, that's not okay. I'm like, no, he had a horrible sense of humor. I miss it very much. So yes, that's a perfect note. Jordan's terrible sense of humor. But yeah, so that's my story. I will talk to y'all later. Ciao.